Welcome to the world of Islam. This beautiful programming will be hosted by Sajjar Abbas Khan and Shoaib Yahya. The topic of discussion today is going to be the subjects that are explored in the world of Islam. Let's discover what they are.
Assalamu alaikum. This is your host, Sajjar Abbas Khan, with the show The World of Islam. And my co-host is?
Shoaib Yahya. Assalamu alaikum from me as well.
As we did our first show last time, we wanted to continue on that and give you what is the purpose of this program. We want to educate the audience on Muslims in America. We want to show real people who live here today, who have immigrated here, were born in other cultures, and are living in this multicultural society. We want to help demystify a major demographic group of America and the world. We want to help clear the air and spread knowledge about the Muslims living here. We want to give experiences of real people and their involvement in the society. We're going to help bring a face to the contemporary Muslims. We also want to go ahead, look into the lives of people living here through a series of dialogues. Guest speakers will help look at their fields and accomplishments, have a dialogue around core issues we face today, such as the perceptions of Muslims versus the reality. We'll delve into history, and achievements and accolades in Islam, and how the cultures have contributed to our world. To start off with, we're going to go through the different segments that we're going to be covering in the coming programs. We want to go into specific subject matters. We want to look at where the Muslim civilization started. Around 750 AD, the Muslims started to go ahead, take over Middle East, what is now known as Baghdad, which was also part of today's Iraq. The Muslims started contributing to making the capital of their world in Baghdad and started to spread the civilization from there on. Around the 10th century, we had Egypt started their own city, the big city known as Cairo. That became the rival of Baghdad. And that's where some of the civilization and what you see today, some of the architecture, some of the education, that can be traced all the way out to that time. Muslims basically learned how to make paper from the Chinese and pass the knowledge on to Europeans. We also want to let you know that Muslims were basically contributed of Persians, Egyptians, North African, and Turks. It wasn't necessarily just the Arabs. And we'll be talking about other subjects. Shoaib?
Yeah, we're going to bring up the architecture in the Muslim culture, the art of city building. In particular, we'll talk about one of the main rulers or caliphs of the time in the 8th century who built the city of Baghdad. He took an enormous amount of time and resources, by some estimates over 100,000 people working over a period of more than 4 years to build that city. So we'll talk about that.
Very good. One of the other major items that Muslims contributed towards architecture were the mosque. Muslims have their distinctive forms of architecture, particularly in types of buildings, which included mosque. There were different materials, design used in building these. And in today's world, we can trace the history of that architecture going all the way from Africa through Europe to Turkey to Middle East and Asia, and we can trace out the architecture and the contributions of Muslim in that world. Shoaib?
We'll talk about scholarship and learning. In the times of the 8th and 9th century, the Muslim rulers and leaders were very interested in opening schools, universities, and colleges, and that brought about an environment where scholars from other parts of the world also came in, and people worked in congruency. And translations of various kinds of philosophies, art, and literature began to happen, including works of the Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. So we'll discuss that as well.
Excellent. Very good. And again, this history is filled with examples of that. We'll also be talking about the science and technology. Muslims show endless curiosity, and their basic persistence was around if God had made this world, we want to look at what was behind those basic things. Things like, don't just look at the sky, find out how it was raised. So the intellectual curiosity that was pursued by the Muslims in that era. Shoaib?
We'll discuss zoology. Interestingly, we bring up zoology because in the earlier times, people were only interested in herding and animal or cattle keeping. But then from there on, it became into a science. And we'd like to delve into that and see how the Muslim scientists turned this into, from an art into a science.
Excellent. We'll also be looking at shows where we'll talk about astronomy, which is a study of objects in the universe. Astronomers figured out the exact times for prayers, the length of the month of Ramadan. Some also realized that Earth was rotating like a spinning top. People in those times thought that Earth was flat. Muslims looked into that, and their contribution was to look at it as a round or a globe. And that's how it helped with some of the navigation tools, traveling and navigation around the world. Shoaib?
We'll talk about irrigation and underground wells, and we bring that up because in those times, agriculture was the most important feature of people's lives and perhaps also of business. So we'll talk about how dams were built, how aqueducts were built, and how waters were pulled from way under the ground and brought up and put into canals and reservoirs.
Excellent. I hear some of those wells went all the way 50 feet deep, even in those times, to get water. We'll also be talking about geography and navigation. Muslim geographers examined plants and animals in different regions. People who were educated in the medieval times believed the earth was round. Muslims disagreed. They created extremely accurate maps to aid in travels. Muslims used navigation instruments, and some of the instruments that were used, compass and astrolabe, they were actually inventions of other people. Chinese people had created the compass, Greeks had created astrolabe, but those objects were, or those tools were perfected by Muslims in their navigation around the world. So this was a very important part of their research. Shoaib?
No science is ever completed without mathematics, so we will discuss mathematics and contribution of the Muslim scholars to mathematics. In particular, we will discuss Al-Khwarizmi, who is known as the father of algebra and the inventor of algebra, of course. His theorems and his works to this day are used to solve complex numerical systems using advanced computer systems. So we'll go into that as well.
And from what I hear, the Arab numerals were actually popularized in those times and were brought into Europe. And so I think Al-Khwarizmi was also known to have explored the Indian use of the word or the number for empty or zero that was brought into the world, and it is used in all the calculations. So
Absolutely.
That would be a very interesting discussion.
Yes. Zero was adopted from the Indian culture
Okay.
and brought into mathematics.
Excellent, excellent. We'll also be talking about medicine, about Muslim doctors, what was established. The first hospital in the world was actually created by Muslims. They were also basically creating in these remote villages hospitals that separated male and female sections. They also started to go ahead perform surgeries, and these were surgeries that included amputations. They also did cataract surgeries. So a lot of these detailed procedures were carried out in those times, and there was a Persian physician called Al-Razi. He actually was one of the first ones who looked at the science of bacteria and how they were causing infections. His work helped other physicians diagnose and treat these deadly diseases. Persian philosopher Ibn Sina was also a great doctor. He was nicknamed as the Prince of Physicians, and Muslim doctors, the work they have done, helped European medicine very early in making it the science that it is today. Shoaib?
We'll discuss bookmaking and literature. In those times, it was very difficult to publish books. It was very difficult to get hold of books. So there was a group of people that were put together to create books and establish a system where books could be published. And of course that helped in creating literature. All kinds of great story writing came about in this, and in particular there's a 1001 Night story which we will also touch about.
Right. I mean, up till then, there was an oral history tradition where things were carried out in oral history. That specific era is where we started to document and bring this about to the rest of the world. So absolutely, those are great areas. We also will be discussing the world of art and music. Basically, geometric and floral designs was pursued by Muslims because they looked at everything around them as a source of beauty, that God can create something that is alive. So artists turned their shapes and patterns around them and brought them in their different designs. There was also a specific design called arabesque. It took its beauty from the natural world. Artists would use the simple tools like rulers and compasses to create abstract designs from these shapes. Shoaib?
We'll discuss calligraphy. As you know, calligraphy is the art of beautiful handwriting. This played an important role in the Muslim culture, and all kinds of different types of calligraphies came into existence. So we'll touch base on that as well.
Very good. We'll also be talking about textiles. In medieval times, great artistry to the making of textiles, clothes, as status symbols was used by the Muslim world. Fine textiles served as awning carpets in the royal palaces, and that's what distinguished them for the guests who visited. Shoaib?
We'll touch on music in the Muslim world. In particular, there were cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba that became seats of music. New music became, introduced in that time, and also new types of musical instruments came about. So we'll touch base on that as well.
Excellent. And, moving on about some of the areas in sports or athletics, there were, in some areas, things that were created by other societies, civilizations, that were adapted by Muslims and really popularized. In one of those cases, the game of polo, which was actually the game where people ride horses and use mallets, basically wooden sticks, to strike a ball through a goal. This became a sport that was adapted by the Muslim world and popularized. It was basically refined, and it was used by the royals. It became a sport that is played throughout the world today and is a very popular thing. So again, that was something that was explored by Muslims and brought out to the rest of the world.
And another sport like chess will bring about that as well. It came out of India and then widely adapted and adopted all over the place. So we'll bring about that too.
Very good. And again, the whole game of chess, which is basically a very complex rule-based object to go ahead, get through to checkmate, something that Muslims explored from India and brought it out to the rest of the world. Some of the things that we adapted and brought out for the rest of the world to experience. So again, our next few programs, we're going to be going into specific subjects. We're going to talk through how things were popularized or invented. And these are some of the subjects we're going to cover. These are not the only ones. We'll also get hopefully some help from our audience who will get to us about any specific subjects they want us to cover, anything specific that they want us to address, questions they have. So we're looking forward to some of the programs that are coming up and hoping to go ahead, educate ourselves and the audience with this program.
Yes, don't forget to send us your questions.
We'll be looking forward to your feedback, and we want to incorporate that into this program. And remember, this show is for you, by you. We want to go ahead, incorporate everything you give to us, bring that back to you, and we want to make sure that we clarify some of the myths, some of the misunderstanding, and we want to clear that and bring an educational show for all of us. So looking forward to the next programs. Please go ahead, write to us and send us your feedback. Look forward to the next program. This is your host, Shajar Abbas Khan. We look forward to the next show.
And Shoaib Yahya, and thank you so much, and Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.